Los Angeles, 1977. The city was a sprawling, neon-soaked graveyard of broken dreams and gilded cages. It was a time when the high-gloss glamour of the old world was being strangled by the gritty, drug-fueled reality of the new, and at the epicenter of this cultural earthquake sat Roman Polanski, the man who had turned the darkness of his own life into the most haunting cinema the world had ever seen. He was a survivor of the Holocaust's shadow, the widower of the Manson family's most gruesome massacre, and the visionary director who had just reinvented American cinema with the masterpiece Chinatown. To the elite of Hollywood, he was a tragic genius. To the women of the hills, he was a magnetic, dangerous enigma who carried the scent of European decadence and ancient sorrow. But beneath the thunderous applause of the Oscars and the endless flow of vintage champagne at the Beverly Hills Hotel, a different kind of storm was gathering. Roman Polanski didn't just film noir, he lived it, breathed it, and eventually, he was consumed by it. He was a man who walked between the cracks of morality, always glancing over his shoulder, as if the ghosts of his past were finally gaining ground on his present. This isn't just a story about a legal trial that shook the foundations of the industry. It's a story about the secret nights, the hidden chambers, and a fictionalized shadow named Mila, the prop girl who became the final, tragic piece in a trap that would send the King of Darkness into a permanent, lonely exile. This is the pulse of 1977, a year where the flashbulbs didn't just celebrate fame. They captured the fall of a titan. By the spring of 1977, Roman Polanski was arguably the most powerful director in the world. He moved through the Pink Palace, the Beverly Hills Hotel, like a phantom monarch. Short in stature but colossal in ego, he possessed a charisma that was both intoxicating and terrifying. He spent his afternoons scouting locations for his next grand vision, and his nights scouting for something far more fleeting. He was a man obsessed with the look, the way a shadow fell across a face, the way a spotlight caught the smoke of a cigarette, the way innocence could be manipulated into something darker on celluloid. But the seasoned starlets of Hollywood had become a bore to him. They were too polished, too aware of the camera. Roman wanted something raw, something he could direct in the real world without the interference of a script. He found his muse in the dusty, labyrinthine backlots of Paramount Studios. Her name was Mila. She wasn't an actress, at least not yet. She was a prop assistant, a girl who spent her days cataloging the fake artifacts of movie history, plastic skulls, rubber revolvers, and tinsel crowns. She had a face that belonged in a 1920s silent film. Wide, haunting eyes and a fragile beauty that seemed to vibrate with a desperate hunger for life. Mila dealt in illusions. She knew how to make a wooden prop look like cold steel. To Roman, she was the ultimate find, a blank canvas upon which he could project his most twisted narratives. He didn't just want her, he wanted to direct her life. He began leaving notes for her in the prop room, written in a cramped, hurried hand. He invited her to private screenings where the only two people in the theater were him and her, the flickering light of the projector casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. He was weaving a web, and Mila, blinded by the radiance of his genius, walked into it with a smile that would soon turn to ash. Their clandestine affair was a masterclass in secrecy. Roman didn't take Mila to the trendy discos like Studio 54 or the high society galas at the Hilton. He didn't want witnesses, he wanted a stage. He chose a secluded, Gothic-style villa tucked away in the jagged folds of Nichols Canyon. The house was owned by a world-famous actor who was away on a 6-month shoot in Morocco, leaving the keys in Roman's hands. The villa was a labyrinth of heavy velvet curtains, antique statues, and walls lined with broken mirrors. It was a place where the California sun never quite reached the floorboards. A place where time seemed to have stopped in 1940. Mila would arrive long after midnight, her heartbeat echoing against the canyon walls like a drum. Inside, Roman treated their encounters as if he were behind a Panavision camera. He would position her under a single, harsh spotlight in the center of the grand salon, directing her every movement. "Stand here, Mila. Look into the shadows. Don't blink." He was obsessed with the aesthetics of their sin. They would drink heavy, ink-dark wine and listen to scratchy records of Polish jazz. Roman would talk for hours about the nature of evil, a subject he understood better than perhaps any man alive. He told her that morality was nothing more than a prop, a convenient lie that ordinary people used to feel safe in a world that was inherently chaotic and cruel. For Mila, it was a dizzying, terrifying descent. She was sleeping with a legend, but she felt like she was being slowly edited out of her own existence. She began to notice the cracks in Roman's armor. She saw the way his hands shook when a car pulled into the driveway. She saw the hidden tape recorders tucked behind stacks of leather-bound scripts. She realized that Roman wasn't just a lover. He was a man in a state of permanent, vibrating flight. He was a man who lived as if his life were a film that was about to be cut short by a vengeful editor. And in his arrogance, in his belief that he was the master of all shadows, he failed to see that he was no longer the only one holding a camera. The night of the collapse, March 10th, 1977, was unnervingly quiet. A thick fog had crawled up from the Pacific, swallowing the canyon in a white, cold shroud. Roman had invited Mila to the villa for what he described as the final act. He was in an expansive mood, fueled by expensive cognac and the delusion of invincibility. He believed that his talent gave him a get-out-of-jail-free card from the laws of common men, but the reality of Hollywood was shifting. The era of the untouchable director was coming to a violent end. As the clock in the hallway struck 2:00 a.m., the atmosphere in the villa changed from seductive to predatory. Roman was orchestrating a scene that crossed every line of decency, believing that within these walls he was the only law. But the heavy oak doors of the villa didn't just open, they were shattered. A team of fixers, men hired by a rival studio head who had been looking for a way to ruin Polanski for years, burst into the room. They weren't there to save Mila, they were there to capture a trophy. The darkness of the villa was incinerated by a barrage of high-powered flashbulbs. Snap, snap, snap. The sound was like a firing squad. The light was so intense it felt physical. In those flashes, the world saw the genius for what he was in that moment. A panicked, small man caught in the act of his own destruction. Mila screamed, scrambling for her clothes, her face a mask of betrayal. The fixers didn't say a word. They didn't need to. They had the film. They had the leverage. They retreated into the fog as quickly as they had arrived, leaving Roman standing in the wreckage of his own mirrored room. Within 48 hours, the rumors began to hemorrhage through the city. The police, already building a case on a separate, darker incident involving a 13-year-old girl, now had the momentum they needed to bring the king down. The days that followed were a chaotic blur of legal maneuvers, frantic negotiations, and the smell of fear. As the 1977 trial began to tear through the headlines, Roman Polanski's world became a cage. His lawyers worked around the clock, trying to suppress the canyon tapes, trying to erase Mila from the narrative. Mila was handled with the cold efficiency of a studio production. She was given a massive payout and a new identity in a desert town in Arizona. Her name scrubbed from the Paramount payroll. Her very existence turned into a deleted scene that the public would never see. But the law was closing in. The judge was not a fan of the genius defense. On the eve of his sentencing, Roman realized that his life in America was over. He couldn't direct his way out of a prison cell. On a freezing night in early 1978, under the cover of a disguise and a fake passport, the director made his final escape. He didn't go to court, he went to LAX. He boarded a flight to Paris, a man who had conquered the dream factory, now fleeing it like a thief. As the plane roared into the night sky, Roman looked out the window at the flickering grid of Los Angeles, a city he had captured so perfectly in Chinatown. He knew, with the certainty of a man who understands tragedy, that he would never touch that soil again. He was no longer a director, he was a fugitive. He was an exile, forever doomed to wander the streets of Europe, haunted by the ghost of a girl in a red-lit villa and the blinding white light of a camera that he couldn't control. Nearly 50 years have passed, and Roman Polanski remains one of the most polarizing figures in history. He continues to make films in Europe, masterpieces of tension and paranoia, as if he is trying to explain his own life through the lens of others. But the black file of 1977 remains open in the mind of the public. The mystery of Mila, the prop girl who vanished into the Arizona dust, is a whispered legend among the old-timers at Paramount. They say the canyon tapes still exist, locked in a safe somewhere in Switzerland, waiting for a day when the truth is finally allowed to breathe. Polanski's story is a chilling testament to the fact that no amount of talent can outrun the shadows we create. You can win the world's respect. You can change the face of art. But the past is the one editor you can never fire. The fog of San Francisco might have protected Clint Eastwood, but the neon lights of Los Angeles burned Roman Polanski into a permanent shadow. Hollywood is a place built on the idea that you can be whoever you want to be. But in 1977, Roman Polanski